What the hell is this smell? Reed Langford turned toward the door. Good heavens. The class loser finally shows up. Vance Harlan stepped into the ballroom wearing a flannel shirt and faded jeans. Laughter rippled through the room. Are you here to beg for leftovers, you useless piece of trash? Who let the beggar through? Still broke. Still pathetic. 20 years and you couldn't even afford a decent shirt. Vance stood still. Nice to see you again, Reed, he said softly. Reed grabbed a glass of water and poured it over Vance's head. Slow. Deliberate. Cool off, loser. You stink up the place just by breathing. Water dripped down Vance's face. He didn't move. Reed thought he knew everyone in that room. He was wrong. And what happened next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Years earlier, Vance Harlan stepped onto the Glenville University campus with everything he owned, stuffed into a single duffel bag. The bag was gray, frayed at the zipper. His mother had stitched the strap back on twice with dental floss because thread was too expensive that month. He carried it over his right shoulder and walked through the front gates like a man entering a country where he didn't speak the language. The campus smelled like fresh-cut grass and money. Expensive cars lined the parking lot. Students wore brands Vance had only seen in magazines left behind at the laundromat. He wore a white t-shirt his mother had bleached so many times, the collar had gone translucent. Lila Harlan had driven him there in an old Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and a passenger door that only opened from the outside. She had worked 3 jobs that summer. Hotel maid in the morning, grocery cashier in the afternoon, overnight janitor at the bus station, to cover his first semester. She never told him about the blood she had started coughing into the bathroom sink. You call me every Sunday, she said, gripping his hand through the window. Yes, ma'am, and you don't let nobody make you feel small. Yes, ma'am. She drove away. The Civic backfired twice before it disappeared around the corner. 2 girls sitting on a bench nearby laughed. One of them pointed. Vance picked up his duffel bag and walked toward the dormitory. He didn't look back. He met Reed Langford on the 3rd day. It happened in the dining hall. Vance was sitting alone at a corner table eating a plate of rice and beans, the cheapest option on the meal plan. His tray was dented. His fork was plastic because he had missed the silverware line. Reed walked in like he owned the room. Polo shirt, gold watch. 3 guys behind him, Harlan Mercer, Quinn Mercer, and a tall kid named Gage Harmon, who laughed at everything Reed said like it was scripture. Reed stopped at Vance's table and looked down at the plate. Rice and beans, Reed said. Vance didn't look up. It's good. It's poverty food. Reed pulled out the chair across from Vance and sat down without asking. Where are you from? South Glenville. South Glenville. Reed repeated it slowly, like he was tasting something rotten. That's where they found those meth labs last year, right? Harlan leaned in. Bro, that's where the city dumps its sewage. Makes sense, Reed said. He smells like it. Quinn laughed so hard he knocked over his water. Reed leaned closer. His breath smelled like mint gum and entitlement. What's your name? Vance. Vance. Reed nodded. Then he grinned. Nah. I'm going to call you something else. Something that fits better. He looked at Harlan, at Quinn, at Gage, then back at Vance. Class loser. He said it loud. The tables around them went quiet. A girl with a ponytail 3 seats over covered her mouth. A guy in a baseball cap snorted into his coffee. Nobody objected. Nobody told Reed to stop. The name stuck like a cigarette burn. By the end of the first week, the whole floor knew it. By the end of the first month, the whole campus. People Vance had never met would pass him in the hallway and mutter it under their breath. Some said it to his face. Most just smiled when Reed said it loud enough for everyone to hear. The things Reed did to Vance over the next 4 years were not creative. They were relentless. They were designed to grind a man down one humiliation at a time until there was nothing left to grind. One semester, Vance spent 3 weeks on a research paper for Professor Vale's economics class. He typed it on the library computer because he didn't own a laptop. Printed it at the campus center, 20 cents a page. He left it on his desk in the dorm to grab lunch. When he came back, the paper was soaking in a puddle of Gatorade on the floor. Orange. The pages had curled and bled together. Reed's sneaker print was on the cover page. Next to it, a sticky note in Reed's handwriting. "Better luck next life, loser." Vance reprinted it. 52 pages, $10.40. He ate one meal a day for the rest of the week. That same semester, someone taped a sign to Vance's locker. Block letters. Black marker. "Class loser lives here." It stayed up for 11 days. The RA walked past it every morning. He never removed it. Other students saw it. Some looked away. Some smirked. One girl, a sophomore whose name Vance never learned, stopped in front of it one morning, stared at it for 5 seconds, then kept walking. She never came back to take it down either. Vance peeled it off himself on the 12th day. The adhesive left a scar on the metal that never came off. 2 weeks later, someone slid a note under his dorm room door. No name, just a printed photo of a bus ticket back to South Glenville, and 3 words scrolled across the bottom. "Take the hint." Vance folded the note, put it in his desk drawer, and went to class. Junior year, group project for business strategy. The professor assigned teams randomly. Vance was put with 3 students. All 3 asked to switch groups within 24 hours. Reed had told them that if they worked with Vance, they would never get invited to anything again. Not the parties, not the study groups, not the networking events where alumni handed out internships like candy. The professor let them switch without asking why. Vance did the project alone. 60-page report, financial modeling, market analysis. He got an A. The group that dropped him got a B-. Nobody mentioned it. The worst day came in the spring of senior year. Professor Reed's advanced finance seminar. Final presentations. Vance had prepared for 2 weeks. His slides were clean. His data was tight. He stood at the front of the room and began speaking about micro-lending models in underserved communities. 90 seconds in, a sound came from the back row. A monkey screech, high-pitched, exaggerated. Unmistakable. Reed was leaning back in his chair, hand over his mouth, making the sound just loud enough for the room to hear. Harlan covered his face, shaking with laughter. Quinn bit his fist. Nia Walsh had her phone out, recording the whole thing with a grin that could curdle milk. The room froze. 26 students. 1 professor. Nobody said a word. Nobody told Reed to stop. Nobody even shifted in their seat. Professor Reed adjusted his glasses, looked at Reed, looked at Vance, then looked down at his laptop. "Continue, Mr. Harlan," Vance continued. His voice didn't crack. His hands didn't shake. He finished all 14 slides and walked back to his seat in silence. Nia posted the video that night. 43 laughing emojis in the comments. Vance saw every single one. That night, he sat on the floor of his dorm room and called his mother. "Mama, I want to come home." A long pause. He could hear her breathing, thinner than it used to be, shallower, like air through a cracked window. "You're not coming home, baby. They don't want me here. I didn't send you there to be wanted. I sent you there to learn. And when you're done learning, you build something so big that every single one of them will have to look up to see it." Vance pressed the phone against his forehead and closed his eyes. "You hear me, Vance?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then stay." He stayed. He stayed through the name-calling, through the Gatorade and the sneaker prints, through the monkey sounds and the silence of professors who chose their donors over their students, through the sign on his locker and the video with 43 laughing emojis. He stayed through all 4 years. And on graduation day, he walked across the stage in a gown he'd borrowed and shoes with holes in the soles. His mother sat in the back row in a wheelchair, oxygen tube under her nose, clapping with hands that barely had the strength to close. Nobody else clapped. Reed and his crew were in the front row, whispering, laughing, already planning their summer in the Hamptons. Vance took his diploma, looked out at the audience, found his mother's face. She was smiling. That was enough. He walked off the stage, put the diploma in his duffel bag, the same gray one with the dental floss strap, and left Glenville without saying goodbye to a single person. He had $200 in his checking account, a degree nobody respected, and a name that still rang in his ears every time he closed his eyes. Class loser. He was going to make them eat it. The bus ticket from Glenville to Atlanta cost $47. Vance caught himself. He exchanged it for one that cost $46. He arrived at the Greyhound station with his duffel bag, his diploma, and $154 left in his pocket. The station smelled like diesel and floor cleaner. A man sleeping on a bench near the vending machines reminded Vance of his uncle. He bought 2 coffees, gave one to the man, and kept walking. His first apartment was a studio above a dry cleaner in East Point, $400 a month, no air conditioning. The ceiling leaked when it rained, and it rained a lot that summer. He put a pot under the drip and slept on a mattress he'd found on the sidewalk 3 blocks away. He flipped it over, sprayed it with disinfectant. It smelled like chemicals for 2 weeks. Then it just smelled like him. He got a job at a warehouse in College Park. Night shift, loading pallets of frozen chicken onto refrigerated trucks from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. The cold was the kind that got into your joints and stayed there. His fingers cracked and bled by the second week. He wrapped them in electrical tape and kept lifting. During the day, he walked to the Atlanta Fulton Public Library on Carnegie Way. He sat at a desktop computer between a retired schoolteacher learning email and a teenager playing flash games. He opened free coding tutorials. HTML first, then CSS, then JavaScript, then Python. He didn't understand any of it at first. The syntax looked like a foreign alphabet. But he kept showing up every single day. 8 hours at the library, 8 hours at the warehouse. The remaining 8 split between sleep, eating, and staring at the ceiling. By the second year, he could build a basic website. By the third year, he could build a database. By the fourth year, he was writing his own algorithms in a notebook on the bus to work. The idea came to him in the middle of the night. He was stacking pallets of frozen shrimp when the warehouse foreman screamed at a driver for delivering to the wrong dock. The driver screamed back. The shipment sat in the loading bay for 40 minutes, thawing. Vance watched $12,000 worth of seafood turn into garbage because 2 men couldn't coordinate a delivery. He went home that morning and wrote 3 words on a napkin. Fix the chain. Logistics. That was the problem. Not the trucks, not the drivers, not the warehouses. The software that connected them was broken or didn't exist. Small and mid-sized companies were still using spreadsheets and phone calls to track shipments. Vance had seen it from the inside. He'd watched millions of dollars rot on loading docks because the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. He spent 6 months building a prototype, a logistics platform that tracked shipments in real time, optimized routes, predicted delays before they happened. He coded it on the library computer, tested it on paper, refined it in his notebook on the bus. Then he started knocking on doors. The first investor said no before Vance finished his second sentence. The second investor didn't show up to the meeting. The third laughed. The fourth said the market was too crowded. The fifth said Vance didn't have the right background. The sixth said he didn't have the right connections. The seventh said he didn't have the right look. Vance knew what that meant. Investors 8 through 14 found different ways to say the same thing. Too risky, Too early. Too unproven. One of them, a man in a blue suit with a Harvard ring, leaned across the table and said, "Son, go get a real job. This isn't for people like you." Vance stood up, shook his hand, walked out. Sat in his car, a beat-up Corolla with nearly 200,000 miles, and pressed his forehead against the steering wheel. He thought about his mother. Lila had died 8 months earlier. Lung cancer. Stage 4 by the time she finally went to a doctor, because she had spent 3 decades choosing between her health and her son's tuition. Vance had driven back to Glenville for the funeral. 12 people came. The pastor mispronounced her last name. Vance paid for the casket with his warehouse savings. He couldn't afford a headstone, so he marked the plot with a wooden cross he'd built from pallet scraps. He sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes. Then he started the engine and drove to the next meeting. Investor 15 was Gloria Reed. She was 61. Silver hair, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She ran a small venture fund out of a converted firehouse in Midtown. She specialized in founders that other people overlooked. Vance walked in with his laptop, a refurbished ThinkPad he'd bought for $120, and gave the same pitch he'd given 14 times before. Same slides, same data, same calm, steady voice. Gloria listened without interrupting. When he finished, she took off her glasses and set them on the table. "How long have you been building this?" 6 months for the prototype. 4 years learning to code. "Where'd you learn?" "Public library." She stared at him for a long time. Not at his clothes, not at his shoes, at his eyes. 50,000, she said. "I want 15% equity and a board seat." Vance's hands shook under the table. He pressed them against his knees. "Deal," he said. Apex Ventures was born in a garage on Memorial Drive that Vance rented for $400 a month. The first 3 employees were people he'd met at the library, a retired database administrator, a college dropout who taught herself UX design, and a Nigerian immigrant who could write back-end code faster than anyone Vance had ever seen. They worked 18-hour days. They ate ramen and gas station sandwiches. They slept on air mattresses between server racks. The garage had no heat in winter and no ventilation in summer. Vance lost 15 pounds in the first 6 months, but the product worked. Vance remembered the first time the dashboard lit up green. Every truck accounted for, every route optimized, every delivery window hit. He sat in the garage at 2 in the morning, staring at the screen, and thought about the frozen shrimp rotting on that loading dock, about the foreman screaming, about the $12,000 that disappeared because nobody had built what he'd just built. He closed his laptop and slept 4 hours on the air mattress. It was the best sleep he'd had in years. The first client was a regional grocery chain with 32 stores across Georgia. Their logistics were a disaster. Spoiled produce, late deliveries, phantom inventory. Vance's platform cut their waste by 40% in 90 days. The CFO called Gloria Reed personally to say it was the best investment she'd ever recommended. Word spread quietly at first, then louder. Over the years, Apex grew to 200 employees and contracts in 11 states. Then they expanded into cold chain pharmaceuticals, vaccines, insulin, blood products. The kind of cargo where a missed delivery didn't mean lost revenue. It meant someone died. Then Apex went public. The IPO valued the company at $4.2 billion. Vance Harlan, the kid from South Glenville who'd eaten rice and beans alone in a college dining hall, was now worth more than every person who'd ever called him class loser combined. But he didn't do interviews, didn't post on social media, didn't attend galas or charity auctions where cameras waited at the door. No Forbes cover, no TED Talk, no public photos after a certain point. He was a ghost with a balance sheet, and he started buying things quietly. A commercial real estate portfolio across the Southeast, a minority stake in 2 professional sports teams, a tech incubator in downtown Atlanta, and one purchase that nobody understood: the Grand Glenville Hotel, the most expensive property in a town most people couldn't find on a map. He bought it through a shell company called Meridian Holdings. No announcement, no press release. The staff didn't know who owned it. The town didn't know. Reed Langford, who by then had run his father's company into the ground and was working as a mid-level operations manager at Pinnacle Logistics, definitely didn't know. Pinnacle Logistics was a subsidiary of Apex Ventures. Reed Langford had been working for Vance Harlan for 2 years. He had no idea. The Grand Glenville Hotel had never looked better. Someone had hung a banner across the ballroom entrance: Glenville University Class Reunion. Together again. Gold letters on navy fabric. Underneath it, a table with name tags arranged in alphabetical order. Each tag had the graduate's senior yearbook photo printed beside their name. Vance found his. The photo showed an 18-year-old kid in a borrowed gown, looking straight at the camera with an expression that was either exhaustion or defiance. Hard to tell the difference. He peeled the tag off the table and stuck it to his flannel shirt. The ballroom was already filling up. Crystal chandeliers threw light across marble floors. A jazz quartet played in the corner near a bar, stocked with bottles that cost more than Vance's first month of rent in Atlanta. Round tables with white tablecloths. Centerpieces with lilies and candles. The kind of room designed to make people feel important. Reed Langford stood near the center of it all. He'd gained weight. Not the soft kind. The swollen kind that comes from stress eating and too many bourbons after work. His suit was expensive, but didn't fit right. The jacket pulled at the shoulders. The pants broke too high above his shoes. He wore a Rolex, but Vance noticed the way Reed kept adjusting it, rotating it on his wrist like a nervous habit. A man who was comfortable with wealth didn't fidget with his watch. The Rolex was a lie Reed wore on his body. Vance could spot it from across the room. Harlan Mercer stood beside him, thinner than college, receding hairline. He sold insurance now. Vance knew this because Apex's data analytics division tracked Pinnacle's employee networks, and Harlan had tried to sell a policy to one of Pinnacle's warehouse supervisors the year before. Quinn Mercer was there too. He managed a car dealership, divorced twice. Nia Walsh had flown in from Charlotte, where she ran a struggling interior design business and posted inspirational quotes on Instagram every morning to an audience of 400 followers. These were the people who had made Vance's life hell for 4 years. They looked ordinary now, smaller than he remembered. Time had done to them what they'd tried to do to Vance, ground them down quietly, without mercy, without announcement. Reed spotted Vance the moment he walked in. The scene from the beginning played out exactly as Reed had planned. The smell comment, the cologne spray, the napkin shoved into his chest. Reed had rehearsed this moment, maybe not consciously, but somewhere deep in his wiring, he needed Vance to be small again. He needed the old hierarchy to hold. He needed to believe that the world still worked the way it had in college, where last names and bank accounts determined who mattered. What Reed didn't notice were the small things happening around the edges of the room. A bartender glanced at Vance and straightened his posture. A waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes adjusted his path to pass closer to Vance, not to serve him, but to nod. A barely visible nod, the kind subordinates give when the boss walks in, and they've been told not to make a scene. Lena Brooks, the hotel's general manager, stood near the service entrance in a charcoal suit. She'd been running the Grand for 3 years, hired directly by Meridian Holdings, which meant hired directly by Vance. She was the only person in Glenville who knew who owned the building. She watched Reed spray cologne on her employer, and her jaw tightened so hard the tendons in her neck showed. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. "Sir, should I intervene?" Vance felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He read the message under the table while Reed was telling Harlan about his VP-level position at Pinnacle. Reed called it VP level. His actual title was Regional Operations Coordinator. Vance had signed off on that title 18 months earlier without blinking. He typed back one word. No, Lena read it, exhaled through her nose, put the phone away, and waited. Reed was on his third bourbon now. The alcohol had loosened him, made him louder, more reckless. He stood at the center of a cluster of former classmates, holding court like he used to in the dining hall. Same posture, same volume, same need to be the loudest voice in the room. "You guys see Vance came?" Reed said, jerking his thumb toward the corner where Vance sat alone. "Unbelievable. I thought he'd at least buy a new shirt." Polite laughter. A few people shifted uncomfortably. "I'm serious," Reed continued. 20 years, and the guy shows up looking like he walked here from a bus stop. Some people just don't change. He took a long sip of bourbon. "Once a loser, or the white church." Harlan nodded. Quinn chuckled. Naya was already composing an Instagram story. A photo of Vance sitting alone at the table with a caption she hadn't finalized yet, but was leaning toward something with the word throwback. A woman named Ava Pennington, who had sat behind Vance in 3 classes and never spoken to him once, leaned toward her husband and whispered, "This feels wrong." Her husband shrugged. "It's Reed being Reed." Ava looked at Vance across the room. He was sitting with his hands folded on the table, still, calm, looking at nothing in particular. She thought he looked like a man waiting for something. She just couldn't figure out what. Reed finished his bourbon and set the glass down hard enough to rattle the silverware. "All right," he said, clapping his hands. "Time for the main event." He walked toward the stage at the front of the ballroom. A projector had been set up behind a podium. A laptop was already connected. Reed had spent 2 weeks putting together a slideshow. Senior year photos, campus memories, inside jokes. But the real reason for the slideshow was the same reason he'd sent that invitation with the handwritten note. He wanted an audience for what came next. Reed tapped the microphone. The jazz quartet stopped. Conversations faded. 200 faces turned toward the stage. "Welcome back," he said, spreading his arms wide. 20 years. Can you believe it? Some of us got better, he flexed. Weak laughter. And some of us. He looked directly at Vance. Some of us didn't change at all. More laughter. Louder this time. The alcohol was working on the crowd now. Vance sat at his table, hands still folded, eyes on Reed. Lena Brooks stood by the service door, arms crossed, watching. Her phone was in her left hand. One text from Vance, and this entire evening would pivot on its axis. But Vance hadn't sent that text yet. He was waiting the way his mother had taught him to wait. Not with weakness, not with surrender, with patience that had teeth. Reed clicked the remote. The projector hummed to life. A photo filled the screen. The Glenville University front gate. Autumn leaves. Golden light. A few people said, let's take a trip down memory lane, Reed said. Click. Homecoming game. The football team hoisting the conference trophy. Harlan pumped his fist. That's me, number 44. Click. Spring formal. Girls in dresses. Guys in rented tuxedos. Click. The campus quad in winter. Snowball fight. Laughter frozen in pixels. Click. The room went quiet. It was Vance. Freshman year. Sitting alone in the dining hall. Rice and beans on a dented tray. His t-shirt had a stain near the collar. His eyes were down. Someone had taken the photo without him knowing. The angle was slightly above, like a person standing over him, with a phone held low. Reed let it sit on the screen. 5 seconds. 10. Long enough for every pair of eyes to absorb the image. And here he is, Reed said, grinning. The one. The only. The class loser. Laughter. Not Ev for it. But enough. Vance, stand up, buddy. Come on and up here. A sarcastic, slow clap started near Harlan's table. Quinn joined. Then a few others who had enough bourbon in them to think cruelty was comedy. The sound bounced off the marble walls like a hollow, mocking heartbeat. Vance stood, walked to the stage, unhurried, hands at his sides, face unreadable. Reed threw an arm around his shoulder like they were old friends. The weight of it felt like a leash. So Vance, 20 years. What have you been up to? I work in tech, Vance said. Reed's eyebrows shot up. Tech? You? He turned to the audience. Vance Harlan in tech. Doing what? Resetting passwords? Something like that, Vance said. Something like that. Reed dragged each word. He clicked the remote. Another photo. Vance's locker with class loser lives here taped across it in block letters. Someone gasped. Most people just stared. Remember this? Reed said. Classic. Absolute classic. Vance looked at the photo. His locker, the block letters, the adhesive scar he'd spent an hour scrubbing off with his fingernails, the empty hallway. Nobody helping. He said nothing. I gotta be honest, Reed continued, turning to face Vance. When I sent you that invite, I didn't think you'd come. He gestured at Vance's clothes. Same outfit. Same energy. Damn Vance. He clicked again. A side-by-side appeared. Freshman Vance on the left. A photo of Vance walking into the hotel tonight on the right. Reed had someone photograph Vance at the door specifically for this slide. He'd planned this moment the way a prosecutor plans a closing argument. Every image chosen, every pause rehearsed, every laugh line tested in the mirror at home. 20 years apart, Reed said. Spot the difference. He squinted. I can't find one. Harlan slapped the table. Quinn pounded his fist. Naya zoomed in with her phone, making sure she got Vance's face. Reed reached into his pocket, pulled out a $5 bill, tucked it into Vance's shirt pocket, and patted his chest twice. Slow, deliberate, the way you'd pat a dog. There you go, buddy. Get yourself something nice. Maybe a belt, maybe some dignity. The laughter hit like a wave. Harlan doubled over. Quinn had tears in his eyes. Naya filmed from the second row, phone steady, angle perfect. A few people laughed nervously, the kind of laughter people produce when they're uncomfortable, but too afraid to be the one who stops it. Vance felt the $5 bill against his chest. He felt the stage lights on his forehead. He felt 200 pairs of eyes pressing into him like thumbs on a bruise. He reached into his pocket, took out the bill, folded it neatly, and placed it on the podium. Keep it, he said quietly. You're going to need it more than I do. The room went still. Reed blinked. Something flickered behind his eyes. Not understanding. Just a faint crack in the windshield. Then he laughed. Loud. Forced. Sure, Vance. Whatever you say. He turned to the audience. Give it up for the class loser. 20 years and still taking it like a champ. Applause. Scattered. Uncomfortable. Ava Pennington sat with her hands in her lap, staring at her drink. Her husband looked at the ceiling. Vance walked back to his table, sat down, folded his hands. Same position. Same stillness. Under the table, his phone buzzed. Lena Brooks. Sir, the documents are ready. Say the word. Vance looked across the room. Reed was still on stage, basking in the attention. Drunk on the same power he'd been drunk on since freshman year. Same cruelty. Same audience. Same silence from everyone who knew it was wrong and chose the easy path of looking away. He thought about his mother. The duffel bag with the dental floss strap, the rice and beans, the monkey sound from the back row, The parking lot where he'd pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and almost given up. Almost. He picked up his phone. One word. Now. Lena Brooks read the message, straightened her jacket, nodded to the 2 security officers behind her, and started walking toward the stage. The ballroom doors opened. Not slowly, not dramatically. Lena Brooks pushed them open with both hands, like a woman who had been waiting 3 years for this exact moment and was done being patient. She walked in flanked by 2 security officers in dark suits. Her heels clicked against the marble in a rhythm that silenced the jazz quartet mid-note. Conversation stopped. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Every head in the room turned toward the sound. Reed was still on stage. He squinted at Lena, annoyed at the interruption. "Excuse me," he said into the microphone. "We're kind of in the middle of something." Lena didn't slow down. She walked past the round tables, past the centerpieces with their lilies and candles, past Harlan and Quinn and Nia and 200 people who had spent the last hour laughing at a man they didn't know was signing their paychecks. She stopped at the foot of the stage. "Mr. Langford," she said. Her voice carried without a microphone. "I need to address the room." Reed leaned into the mic. "And who are you?" "Lena Brooks, general manager of the Grand Glenville Hotel." Reed waved his hand dismissively. "Great. Whatever it is, Schwarz, we'll handle it after the party. We're having a good time. I'm afraid this can't wait." Something in her voice, a weight, a finality, made the room go still. Reed's smirk faded by 1 degree. He looked at the 2 security officers, then back at Lena, then at the audience, searching for support. Nobody moved. "Fine," Reed said. "Make it quick." Lena stepped onto the stage. She didn't take the microphone from Reed. She didn't need to. She turned to face the audience and spoke clearly, the way someone speaks when they've rehearsed every word. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption, but there has been a significant misunderstanding this evening regarding the nature of this venue and who you are guests of." Reed crossed his arms. "I booked this ballroom. I paid for it." "What's the misunderstanding?" Lena turned to him. "You paid a rental fee, Mr. Langford. You don't own this hotel. The owner has been in this room all evening." The air changed. It was like someone had opened a window in a sealed room. People sat up straighter, necks craned, eyes scanned the crowd. Lena turned toward the corner table where Vance sat with his hands folded. "Mr. Harlan," she said, "would you like to address your guests?" The silence was absolute. 200 people held their breath at the same time. The chandeliers above seemed to hum louder in the vacuum. Vance looked at Lena, then at the audience, then at Reed. He stood up, buttoned the top button of his flannel shirt, the only adjustment he made, and walked to the stage for the 2nd time that night. But this time, the room didn't laugh. This time the room watched him the way you watch a wave you didn't see coming. He stepped up to the microphone, tapped it once. The sound echoed through the ballroom. "My name is Vance Harlan," he said. "Most of you know me as the class loser." He let the name hang in the air. People shifted in their seats. Harlan's smile collapsed like wet cardboard. "This hotel, every chandelier, every marble tile, every bottle behind that bar, belongs to me. I purchased it 3 years ago through a holding company called Meridian Holdings. It is a subsidiary of my company, Apex Ventures." Whispers erupted. Phones came out. Fingers typed furiously. Nia Walsh, who 10 minutes earlier had been filming Vance's humiliation, Googled Vance Harlan Apex Ventures. Her screen filled with Forbes articles, Bloomberg profiles, CNBC interviews, a net worth figure with a B in front of it. Her face went white. She turned her phone toward Harlan. Harlan read it. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Quinn Mercer put down his drink so hard, the glass cracked against the table. Reed stood 3 feet from Vance. His arms had uncrossed. They hung at his sides like they'd forgotten what to do. His jaw worked back and forth, chewing on words that wouldn't form. "That's—" Reed started. "That's not possible. You're lying." Lena stepped forward. She held a tablet. On the screen, property ownership documents. Meridian Holdings, Dental, OLLC, a wholly owned subsidiary of Apex Ventures, Inc., signed by Vance A. Harlan, chairman and CEO. Acquisition date clearly listed. She turned the tablet toward the audience, toward Reed, toward the projector. The ownership documents appeared on the same screen that had shown Vance eating rice and beans alone. Reed stared at the screen, then at Vance, then at the screen again. His face went through a sequence of expressions: disbelief, confusion, calculation, and then something Vance recognized from 20 years ago. Fear. The particular fear of a man who realizes the ground he's standing on belongs to someone else. "You're telling me," Reed said slowly, his voice cracking at the edges, "that you own this building?" "I own this building," Vance said. "I own the land it sits on. I own the parking lot where your leased BMW is parked right now." He paused. "And Reed?" "I own something else, too." The room tilted. Everyone felt it. Not physically, but the center of gravity in that ballroom shifted from Reed Langford to Vance Harlan in the space of a single sentence. And it would never shift back. Reed's mouth was open. No sound. "But we'll get to that in a moment," Vance said. He turned to the audience. 200 faces stared back at him. Some were pale. Some were flushed. Ava Pennington was crying. Not loud, just a steady stream down her cheeks, mascara drawing 2 thin lines toward her jaw. Vance looked at the $5 bill still sitting on the podium where he'd left it. He picked it up, held it between 2 fingers, turned to Reed. "You put this in my pocket," Vance said. "In front of everyone. You patted my chest like I was your pet." Reed's mouth moved. "Nothing. I told you to keep it." Vance set the bill down on the podium again. "That offer still stands." He turned back to the microphone. "Now let me tell you about Pinnacle Logistics." Reed's face changed. The fear sharpened into something else. Recognition. The slow, sickening recognition of a man who just heard the name of the company that pays his mortgage, spoken by a person who should not know it exists. "What about Pinnacle?" Reed whispered. Vance smiled for the first time all night. It was not a kind smile. "Pinnacle Logistics," Vance said into the microphone. "Ring a bell, Reed?" Reed's face was the color of old cement. His lips moved, but nothing came out. The Rolex on his wrist caught the chandelier light as his hand trembled. "You work there," Vance continued. "Regional Operations Coordinator. Started 2 years ago. Salary $74,000 a year, plus a company car. A silver Chevy Malibu, if I'm not mistaken." The room was so quiet, Vance could hear the ice melting in someone's glass. Reed swallowed. "How do you know that?" "Because Pinnacle Logistics is a subsidiary of Apex Ventures." Vance paused. "Let every syllable land. My company. You've been working for me for 24 months, Reed. Every paycheck you've cashed, every Monday morning you've clocked in, every quarterly review you've sat through, all of it. Mine." Reed's knees buckled. Not all the way, just a slight dip, like a building settling before it collapses. He caught himself on the podium. His fingers gripped the edge until the knuckles turned white. "That's not—" Reed's voice came out thin, reedy, the voice of a man whose throat had closed around his own pride. "That's not true." Vance pulled out his phone, held it up so Reed could see the screen. A contact labeled Mara Price, Pinnacle HR Director. He pressed call, put it on speaker. 1 ring, 2 rings. "Mr. Harlan." "Good evening, sir." The room heard it. Every word through the phone speaker and through the ballroom's dead silence. Mara Price's voice was as clear as a church bell. "Mara," Vance said, his eyes never leaving Reed's face. "I need you to process a termination, effective immediately." "Of course, sir." "Employee name?" "Reed Langford, Regional Operations Coordinator." A pause. The sound of typing. "Confirmed, Mr. Harlan. Termination paperwork will be sent to Mr. Langford's email within the hour. Shall I flag his final paycheck for expedited processing?" "That won't be necessary," Vance said. "I think Mr. Langford can wait." He ended the call. The phone screen went dark. Vance slid it back into his pocket. Reed stood frozen on the stage. His mouth hung open. His eyes were glassy, the look of a man watching his own house burn down from across the street with the keys still in his hand. "You can't." Reed's voice broke. "You can't do this to me. I have a mortgage. I have car payments. You have nothing," Vance said. "Your father's company went bankrupt years ago. You burned through your inheritance in 3 years. The house is leveraged. The BMW is leased. The Rolex," Vance glanced at Reed's wrist. "That's a replica. I noticed it when I walked in." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back said, "Oh my God," loud enough for the entire room to hear. Nia Walsh lowered her phone slowly, like a soldier putting down a weapon. Her hands were shaking. The Instagram story she'd been composing about Vance, the one with the word throwback, was still on her screen. She deleted it. Harlan Mercer stared at the floor like he was trying to melt into it. Quinn Mercer had pushed his chair back from his table, putting as much distance between himself and Reed as the ballroom walls would allow, as if failure were contagious and he could feel the infection spreading. Reed's face crumpled. Not rage, not defiance. Something worse. The look of a man who had just realized that every single person in the room now knew the truth about him. Not the truth he'd been telling for 20 years. The real one. "You spent 4 years calling me class loser," Vance said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You poured Gatorade on my papers. You taped a sign to my locker. You made monkey sounds while I presented my thesis. You invited me here tonight to humiliate me in front of 200 people." He picked up the $5 bill from the podium, held it out toward Reed. "Here, you're going to need this now." Reed didn't take it. His hand hung limp at his side. Vance placed the bill gently on Reed's jacket lapel and patted it twice. Slow, deliberate. The exact same motion Reed had used an hour earlier. "There you go, buddy," Vance said softly. "Get yourself something nice." He turned off the microphone, set it on the podium, and stepped off the stage. Behind him, the only sound was Reed Langford breathing. Fast, shallow, ragged, like a man drowning on dry land. Nobody helped him. Nobody had ever helped Vance either. The difference was that Vance had learned to swim. Vance walked through the ballroom without looking back. The crowd parted for him, not because anyone told them to, but because something in the air had changed. A shift in gravity that pulled people out of his way, the same way it had pushed them toward Reed for 20 years. His shoes made no sound on the marble, or maybe they did, and nobody could hear it over the silence. Lena Brooks stood by the exit. She held the door open with one hand. Her eyes were red. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Vance walked through the lobby, past the front desk where 2 clerks stood at attention, past the concierge, who pressed his hand to his chest in a gesture that was not trained, not rehearsed, just human. Past the revolving doors and into the Georgia night. The air smelled like magnolia and warm asphalt. Crickets sang in the hedgerow along the circular driveway. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom sat at the curb, engine running, headlights cutting 2 clean lines into the dark. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. "Where to, sir?" Vance didn't answer right away. He stood on the steps of the Grand Glenville Hotel, the building he owned in the town that had tried to break him, and looked up. The sky was clear, stars scattered across it like salt on black cloth. Somewhere behind those stars, his mother was watching. He was sure of it. Not because he was religious, not because he believed in science, because Lila Harlan had spent her entire life watching over her son, and he didn't think death was stubborn enough to stop her. "Home," Vance said. He got into the car. The door closed. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb. Its taillights glowed red against the oak-lined drive, then dimmed, then disappeared. Inside the ballroom, Reed Langford stood alone on the stage, a $5 bill pinned to his lapel, 200 people staring at him. The projector behind him still showed the ownership documents, Vance's name in black ink, right next to the photo of a boy eating rice and beans alone. And for the first time in his life, not a single word left to say. The class loser had left the building, and he took everything with him. If this story hit you, drop a comment. Would you have shown up to that reunion? Share this with someone who's been counted out. And subscribe, because the next story might be yours.